This will be the recap and reflections video for the Nights to Remember session, the newest cycle in our 3 GM experiment with All for One Regime Diabolique by Triple Ace Games has started. I once again have the great pleasure of starting things off. And while I can't say that this session didn't have its problems, it certainly made some big changes in how things are going. This is the launch of our 3rd cycle, as I've mentioned. So the first cycle was an introduction to the characters, an introduction to All for One's version of 17th century France, complete with supernatural horror. The second cycle took those characters, took the elements of their backstory, wrapped them up in the rich tapestry of the game's setting, and began to put terrible events in motion. This 3rd cycle, well, we don't know what's going to happen yet. There has been only the 1 session. But I approached this session of tightening the noose, perhaps, pulling those threads even tighter toward the idea of it's time to act. We've arrived in cycle 1. This is where we are, and things are happening in cycle 2 and cycle 3. Now that we know who and where we are, it's time to act. There are terrible forces out there in the darkness outside the light, and someone must shine that light upon them. And it might as well be us. There is an unusual spin on the heroic in Musketeers literature. Yes, they will lay down their lives for that to which they are loyal. Yes, they are true friends to each other. They are servants of their nation, of their king, and yet they never forget things like getting paid and being rewarded. And while they will continue to suffer on if they're not paid and they're not rewarded, they never stop talking about it. So there is that aspect that we are trying to include in our characters, not merely being heroic, but recognizing that even a hero has to eat and find some place to live. So we have our characters. The events in this session are quite simple. The characters receive an invitation, and this highlights some of the social changes which are going on around them. Their value, their, not exactly fame, but the recognition that these are among the core of the mature, capable, experienced musketeer unit. This makes them attractive to certain elements in Parisian society. Now, the musketeers might not always appreciate this attention, particularly if it's some kind of supernatural horror clawing at them in the darkness, but sometimes things are okay. Sometimes you get to go to formal parties on the arm of wealthy and bored widows. Sometimes you get to visit the homes of the rich and the powerful, and sometimes you get invited to a very well-placed and respected fencing school. Sometimes you get invited to the lowest form of drinking establishment in Paris back alleys. On this night, they are invited to do both, to entertain a master of the school of dance, which is where Briscourt learned his own special fighting style, and to go to a dive called the Risen Lamb by the invitation of the musketeers they have been training. The musketeers decide to do both. Briscourt and Philippe go to the school of dance, where an offer is put before them, and then they go to the Risen Lamb, where temptation is put before them. It's very interesting to see what they do. I was very happy with how this part of the session went. It was light, it was airy, the quirks and foibles of the characters were on display, and there was a lot of witty banter. And we had the opportunity for a fight, and each time the group stepped away from it. It's like the characters are maturing. They are fighting in the street less and less. They can rely on the relationship that they've had with some of these recurring characters. The Cardinal's Guard, Henri, Jean-Luc Thibodeau, and Etienne Legrand made another appearance. But in the background was also Rochefort. And so playing brinkmanship with reputation, with honor, made this scene a lot of fun. But the focal point was the temptation. Briscourt and a lady who matched the image he had of the woman of his dreams. Now, there are a lot of players out there who would simply resist a blatant trap like this, and it was very refreshing to see Francois almost literally embrace the idea. And he turned it into something really, really fun. And that was cool. So this scene ended very satisfyingly, very well, very upbeat. The next day, the Musketeers are required to protect the king. They are called to an early morning meeting where they hear rumors that the Cardinal and the Queen and the King are going to be meeting together. Now, it was in this scene that problems started to happen. These problems weren't procedural. They weren't related to system or things like that. It was more a matter of tone. It was at this point that the tone began to move toward the dark, but I'm not going to spend time talking about them now. Let's finish the recap. So, we have two invitations at the same time. That's how the scenario opens. The Musketeers choose to do both. Second, the Musketeers have early morning guard duty with three very important dignitaries: the King, the Queen, and the Cardinal. During this guard duty, assassins strike. And the stakes are very high. Not only do they have to protect the King, possibly the Queen, possibly the Cardinal, but they have to do so in front of the very famous and, their idol, D'Artagnan and Aramis. Present in the scene are Briscourt and Philippe, and Martin in an NPC role. This scene is full of action, but it's also full of chaos. There are different groups of musketeers around the meeting room. So, as the assassination attempt begins, some come to take the Queen away. Cardinal's guards come to take the Cardinal away. Queen's guards, well, who are they exactly? Who is going to protect the Queen? We have D'Artagnan shouting orders. We have Aramis shouting orders. We have Monsieur de Treville shouting orders. Fortunately, the King, Queen, and Cardinal didn't get involved, but that was enough confusion already. Who do we listen to? Meanwhile, an attack is underway. An attack on the King's palace. Who are they attacking? At this point, we're not even sure. We have Briscourt showing his undying loyalty to the Queen, which was interesting. We have Philippe trying to out D'Artagnan. And we have a dramatic fight on the rooftops of the King's palace. The Musketeers are successful. They defend the royal household. The Cardinal is fine, the Queen is fine, the King is fine, and the security of the palace is assured. But they spend the rest of the day, after being up all night, after serving all the previous day, they spend that day in interrogations and questions and dealing with the prisoners that they've captured and searching for those who escaped. It is night before they're allowed to leave duty. And there in the street, outside is the rich, luxurious carriage of the woman from the night before that had taken Briscour's eye. And bidding Philippe farewell, Briscour enters the carriage, and it is here where things take another turn. And from this point on, we struggled with the light and with the darkness, ultimately ending up in a form of darkness. Maybe we rescued the tone before the end, and maybe not, and you can be the judge along with us. But as the carriage pulls away, Philippe's eye is caught by the lady in the carriage as she's making eye contact with him. She's taunting him in a way, and he sees her for what she is, vampire. But he also sees her beginning to transform into the very likeness of the red-haired Spanish spy which captured his heart and his mind. What was a parting of the ways, a farewell, I'm going off with my lady friend, enjoy your night alone kind of scene, suddenly transforms into Philippe recognizing, and as he puts it, needing to rescue Briscour again. So there's a dramatic battle atop the carriage. There's a duel of wits inside the carriage, which turns cruel and physical. Who is going to get the upper hand? Will the creatures of the night, the vampires that are battling the musketeers, kill, rend, drink the lifeblood from these heroic defenders of France, or will the tables be somehow turned? Or is that really what's going on? As the session comes to a close, our villainess extracts a price, a promise from the musketeers and reveals to them that she is there to watch them suffer. She has created certain situations in order to make them suffer. And she has taken someone that they both love and has used that person to add to the torment. Now, these ideas are quite dark. And that darkness wouldn't matter so much if they were balanced out consistently by decisions which led to the swashbuckling high adventure that we were trying to go with, a pairing of swashbuckling and horror. But as we've mentioned in the past, a swashbuckling attitude is one that is in many regards devoid of fear, the high confidence, the certitude, the devotion to duty or something else. Horror depends on a sense of powerlessness. This blending of these two dynamics isn't easy. Sometimes we get it. This is one of the times where I feel that we didn't, and there are a lot of off-camera reasons for that. So what can we learn from this? There were times where it would have been better for me as the game master to step out from behind the voice of narration and clarify things directly player to player. There were times where I should have, instead of playing off the feelings of threat or impotence, should have found a way to encourage, not push or force, but encourage the players to find that courage, that bravado. By the time we got to the last scene with the carriage, it was too late. What needed to happen before that. And that is in the scene with the assassination. It was in the assassination scene that high adventure became more realistic. The light, airy mood evaporated and it became combat. And yes, there were acrobatics and hijinks and dramatic dueling and fighting. But it was dragged down by personal gravity to a more realistic plane. And so, as we vault from that scene into the last scene, the characters are grounded in reality. The characters have not generated vast acts of style. They have not got this emotional momentum of overcoming great adversity. And so when they come face to face with this horror, who is trying to undermine their confidence, who is trying to make them suffer, it's that much harder for them to stand up and resist. That they still do is a testament to how well we know these characters and how well they are being played. Even though at this point in the session, it's 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning for the players. They are, as people, exhausted. So I can't count this session as a great success. There are parts of it which I really like, and there are things that Francois did as Briscourt and that Ivan did as Philippe that I think really contribute to our understanding of those characters and really made this particular session fun and add to the campaign as a whole. But once again, my fellow game masters are going to have to do extra work to drag us out of this downward direction that one of my sessions is taking us in. So, the struggle is real. Swashbuckling adventure, for some of us, is hard. But that's no reason to give up. All for one, and one for all. Thanks for watching.